Hey, stepmamas, welcome to the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast. This is your go to space for unapologetic, unfiltered conversations about the roller coaster ride of stepmotherhood. We're your hosts. I'm Adrienne.
And I'm Amelia. We understand that being a stepmom is like walking a tightrope in stilettos. So we're here to help you embrace the messiness, laugh through the craziness, and find strength in our shared experiences.
This podcast is more than just a series of episodes, it's a community for stepmoms to be real, raw, and unfiltered. Buckle up because we're about to embark on a journey of candid conversations, taboo topics, and expert insights.
This is the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast, your sanctuary for real talk and real solutions.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast. How are you, Amelia?
I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Hey, so before we dive into our topic, something fun. I know that when we have guests on, we ask them what's in your cup. So, surprise, what's in your cup?
I am drinking coffee, which I shouldn't be at this time of day, but here we are. I needed to a little pick me up. So,
Love that. I'm also
yeah.
drinking coffee, but mine is decaf, as it always is.
Mm.
But I love what's on my cup. It says the liquid that holds the shit show together. So,
That's amazing because mine says ringmaster of the shit show.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, step parenting can be a shit show. So
Definitely.
no surprise there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So today we want to talk about navigating different parenting styles, both within your home with your partner, and also outside your home with your co-parents, the exes, or
Mhm.
the ex, depends on your situation. We have multiples in
Right.
ours, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, varies.
so yeah. So there's there's multiple different parenting styles, right? I mean, there's the authoritative, where it's more really clear boundaries and expectations, um, but also encouraging independence and autonomy for the children and while providing guidance and support.
Mhm.
And then there's the permissive parenting, which is much more lenient, passive, um, you know, less boundaries, less structure, almost no boundaries, no structure, no rules. And it's really all about the child's happiness and avoiding conflict and confrontation. So just letting the children be in complete control. And then
Mhm.
there's authoritarian parenting, where they're very strict and demanding. It's about obedience and discipline, more on the extreme side. And then, of course, there's parents that are the uninvolved parents. They really they're disengaged, almost probably borderline neglectful. And then there's variations between those four, right? Where maybe you're
Mhm.
a piece of this and a piece of that. Probably, probably people don't typically fall all into one.
No,
Um,
of course
and
not.
and I'm sure, like I would say for myself, it's changed over the years, right? As you learn and grow. Um, but the reality is, when you take parenting styles and you take different personalities and you mix it all together, it can create a lot of differences. So I think it's important to talk through how we navigate that in step families and blended families.
Yeah, and I think another couple of things that play a factor are, of course, your own family history. Like, how were you parented? What did that look like? Um, and a huge part, I think, of parenting in step families is guilt. Guilt is often a driving force of how people do or don't
Yes. Yes.
choose to parent their children, right?
Yes.
Which can be extremely damaging, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well, and without calling anyone out, it's something my husband and I talk a lot about is both
mhm,
both how we were raised and whether we want to replicate some of those things or not, and how guilt can be the driving force for the decisions that we make, and that's not always in the best interest of the kids, even though we might mean well in the moment or we might be struggling with something. It definitely real challenges.
yeah, I mean, of course, you want your kids to be happy, and you feel like you have to make it up to them somehow because you know now they're living between homes and all the things, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't benefit them in any way when you don't have any boundaries, when you have zero rules in your home, when you are literally, just a pushover, and, they're getting what they want when they want all of the time. That doesn't serve them when they go off into the world, right? In the big bad world, nobody cares about what kind of home they came from, right? Like your employer doesn't care.
Right.
You need to learn how to be a human being that can live in society. So, as parents, that is our job, to teach our kids how to be good humans. And part of that is picking up a parenting style that, is suited to teach them those skills.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so I think the important message here is don't let guilt be the driving force, and remember that, you know, sometimes maybe it is hard to set those rules in place, or, put those boundaries in place, but ultimately you're doing your kids a favor, because, when they're grown and in the world, it'll be you that helped them, you know, help shape them, right?
Absolutely. I also
Yeah.
think one of the things that was really hard for me early on was accepting that there were different parenting styles, right?
Yes. Oh my
And
God,
that
yes.
my way wasn't the right way 100% of the
Mm.
time, and having to educate myself and learn and be open and accepting of the different ways of parenting, especially with multiple children going between multiple homes and needing to not just figure out co-parenting within my own home with my husband, but co-parenting with multiple exes and then new spouses. It can be a lot and really complicated. But looking back, what I found is that it was worth it. It was because there's like I think one of the things that helped me form bonds and be close to and be able to co-parent, especially with like my biological children's stepmom, was finding the things that she was good at were complementary to the things I was good at. And so it wasn't
Right.
a it
Yeah.
removed the competition, and it was about
Mhm.
how can we both add value to these children's lives
Yeah.
and help them grow and see different styles and personalities, and it's helped them learn how to navigate different personalities in the classroom or at school or among friends, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that, but that came with having to really be accepting that one way isn't the right way all the time.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that's something I still, have to check myself sometimes, and remind myself that, oh yeah, my way isn't necessarily the right way, or the only way.
Right.
Just because I think things should be done a certain way doesn't mean that that's how they should be done. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's an
And
important
well, and
piece.
I think it's also we're using the terminology right and wrong, but I think that's part of wrapping our head around it, right? Is like, why does it have to be right or wrong? Why can't it just be different?
Right. It's, yeah, one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
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 I think that's a piece of it.
Yeah. I keep, when we talked about doing this parenting episode, I keep thinking back to when my stepdaughter was really young, and my husband he's the type of parent that, like, and especially when it comes to his daughter, because he's not with her all of the time. So
Right.
I don't want to say he parents out of guilt, but he definitely doesn't like to say no, when he's asked something of her, or when she asks something of him. And I can remember our first summer that we had our big swing set in our backyard. Almost every weekend, I would get up in the morning, and he would already be outside in the backyard. Like, I'm talking 7 in the morning, quarter to 7 in the morning, pushing her on the swing, you know. And I can remember thinking, why, like, he hasn't even had a coffee yet. We're not even awake. We haven't even had breakfast, and there he is. And I do remember saying to him one time, like, "What are you doing out here? Like, why are you out here so early?" And he's like, "Well, she wanted me to push her on the swing." And I'm like, "It's okay to say no sometimes. Like, it's okay to tell her to wait." And he just was like, you know,
That was a foreign
it's
concept to
okay.
him.
Yeah, he was like, "No, it's okay." And he's so laid back that, like, it didn't really matter. Whereas to me, I would, say to the kids, "Yeah, sorry, we need to have coffee and food first, and then we can go outside." But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that
it's just funny because we are very different, my husband and I.
yeah. So are my
We have
husband and I. I mean, when we first met, I our parenting styles couldn't have been more further
opposite,
apart. Yeah,
yeah.
more opposite, exactly. Um And that was one of the things we had to navigate, right? Was figuring out within our own home, what does this look like? And how do we blend those styles and take the best of both of us and bring it together to give the kids the best? And then how do we ease the kids into those changes? Because it definitely was a change.
Yeah, and that's something I've spoken to clients about before is, yes, there's changes and yes, you want to implement different things, but we don't need to do them all at the same time. Like, let's not overwhelm everyone with all the things, um, say rules, for instance. Maybe you talk to your partner and you both have a few that are like non-negotiable rules, and that's great, but let's not implement all of them at the same time. That's much too overwhelming for kids. So, pick
Right.
one or two and ease into it and let them get used to that, and then you can add um, onto that. And I think another aspect to this conversation is the parenting when you have, the hours babies or children that aren't going back and forth. Like
Mhm.
my daughter doesn't go back and forth, even though she is my husband's stepdaughter. So navigating parenting those kids versus the child that's coming and going.
Right.
And what does that look like? Because that is different, especially in our home where my stepdaughter is here much less than the other two kids. So there are some expectations that are on the kids that are here 100% of the time that aren't on my stepdaughter. And that can be difficult, not so much for my son. He's still young enough that maybe he's doesn't really see it. But my daughter has definitely mentioned to me in the last couple months, how come this and how come that? And, we've
Mhm.
had those conversations about why that is. And
Mhm.
so that's another aspect to it as well. And be open with the kids about it. Sit down and let them talk about it. Um,
Yeah,
because
I
they're
think that's
people and they deserve a conversation, right? Not just,
yeah.
well, because I said so, right? A lot
Right.
of people like to do that. Well, because that's the rule. Well, kids
Right.
are more apt to follow the rule or if they understand the why behind it, right? Like,
That's right. That's
you
exactly what
know,
I was just gonna say, and it's no different, right? If you go to work and your boss tells you to do something and you don't understand the why, you're gonna be sitting there complaining about, "Well, I have to do this, but it doesn't make sense." But if you're
right,
explained the why and you have the context, then you get it and you're more willing to be on
right.
board. It's the same thing with kids, but I think sometimes we forget to treat them like human beings, and
Yes, I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm really all about like communicating with kids. They're people, right?
absolutely.
And maybe you're not going to have the same type of conversation. Obviously, it's going to be dialed in and kid friendly, but
Of
you can still
course.
communicate with them and still,
And still
about
give
all the
them a
things.
voice too and let them express how they feel about things. It doesn't mean that the decision will change, right? But it
Right.
maybe there can be additional understanding and then,
Mhm.
you know, who knows, it might change. There are times we talk to our kids that when I hear their perspective, I'm like, "Oh, you taught me
Right.
something," or, "Oh, I didn't look at
Yeah.
it that way. That's interesting. Let's reevaluate this." And my husband and I will go back and have a different conversation and then come back to them and find some type of compromise, whatever that looks like.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's one thing to figure out co-parenting within your own home and mashing
Mhm.
up parenting styles. And that's almost probably a little bit easier to navigate because hopefully you're wanting to be on the same team and you're not having to battle it. But then you have to turn around and figure that out with the exes. Um, that that can be more challenging.
It can, and I think depending on your situation, it can look different, right? I mean, there's parallel parenting, there is co-parenting where you're working together. You're generally having the same type of rules within the homes, the same routines. The bedtime, for instance. I know that's a big thing.
Right.
Bedtime routine. You're working together to make sure that that's consistent across the board. Where parallel parenting sometimes is the better option depending on the situation. So you do what works for you in your home and the other person does what works for them, and maybe that's not always best for the child, but given the circumstances that is how it has to be, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, I think it varies from relationship to relationship, and I think it can ebb and flow as well. I think there are times
Mhm.
when people can co-parent really well,
Yep.
and then there's other times where parallel parenting needs to happen. So,
Yeah,
lot,
1000%. And that's exactly what I was going to say is it is okay for it to ebb and flow, and it's okay to co-parent on some topics and parallel parent on others. And
yeah,
sometimes
that's true.
parallel parenting is the healthier option, when you
Well, yeah,
really
because you're avoiding the conflict, right? Which is the ultimate goal, right?
right.
We don't want to cause conflict. So if you can come to the understanding of you do you and we'll do us,
Yeah.
right?
Well, especially if you can do it without bad mouthing the other parents or the other home. And, things are going to be different, and that's okay. Different isn't bad.
Yeah, I think like we talk about a lot on this podcast is different perspectives, and we aren't always right, and our way isn't the only way. We might not agree with it like I've talked about before. I don't necessarily agree with all of the decisions that my husband's ex makes and
Right.
the parenting, but doesn't mean it's wrong. It just
That's
means
right.
it's not the way I would do it, but I'm not always the one that makes that decision. So, coming to be okay with that is what has brought the
The
peace,
peace.
right? And
Yeah.
allowed me to just be okay within my own home and within our family and not worrying about what other people are doing.
Yeah, I think that's a big part
Mhm.
of it, the acceptance and understanding that we don't need to concern ourselves with all of it. Sometimes it's okay to just accept things for what they are and move forward.
Yeah.
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 So many different parenting styles, and then you add the personalities into the mix, and it
Yes.
can be a lot, but I also think it doesn't have to be, right? I think
Yeah.
with communication and acceptance and understanding that it's not a one size fits all,
Mhm.
that just those three things, and so much of the drama and the chaos and the worry and the concern go away. It's like, eh, this is my way of parenting. This is how we do it in our home, and if that doesn't align to the other home, accepting it is what it is, and
Yeah.
you need to parallel parent. That's okay.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people need permission, like stepmoms need that permission. There's so much online about like, we're co-parenting and we're all together,
Yeah.
at the, soccer field and, we're all wearing the matching jerseys and like, you know what? It's a Sure, that's great and I love that and I wish that everyone could have that. But also that's not realistic and it really is okay if the alternative is what you do, right? Um, and you shouldn't feel guilty for that because, you know, again, ultimately the idea here is less conflict and just, getting through life and raising these kids
Yeah.
the best way we can. That's the goal, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that made me, as you were saying that, I think there's also an element of respect, right? Respecting each other's perspectives doesn't
mhm,
mean you have to agree, but
right.
you can respect that it's going to be different in the homes, or, that I guess it just goes back to that one way's not right and the other way's wrong. It's just different.
Mhm.
And I think having respect for that is really important.
Yeah, I agree. Mhm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you have questions you'd like us to answer, go to our website, theartofblendedchaos.com. There's a questionnaire on there. There's also a ton of other free resources and tools, that you can check out. And until next time, we hope you have a great week.
A quick disclaimer to cover our asses. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on today's episode are the speaker's own, so if you didn't like them, why didn't you turn us off sooner?
The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. If you need support with a specific topic, you can do so by booking a one-on-one coaching call through our website, theartofblendedchaos.com. This podcast is not intended to replace professional, legal, or medical advice. You seriously didn't think we were lawyers or doctors, did you?